Do you miss the days of AD&D? I do too. You know what one of the funnest characters was to play in AD&D, in my opinion? Was when you were playing a fighter, cleric, magic user. That was a lot of fun. Oh, you agree? Well, good. You're in luck then. Because behind today's secret door, the modern day fighter, magic user cleric, the Celestial Pact of the Blade, Pact of the Chain, Warlock, Test Drive. So behind today's secret door, the Celestial Pact of the Blade, Pact of the Chain, Warlock, Test Drive. This is Secret Door, a channel devoted to in-depth discussion about Dungeons & Dragons, and my name is Matt Morich. Alright, I have started a Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the channel, your help would be greatly appreciated and much needed. And many thanks to Marcelo, Doug, and Jamie for your support. The link will be in the pinned comment and in the description. All right, so a test drive is exactly what it sounds like. It's your ability to see how a class will play level by level. In this case, I'm going to take you from levels 1 through 10. Because it can be kind of a tricky thing to just figure out how a class is going to play based on what you're reading from the book, or even when you're watching a build video. How it actually plays in that level by level progression, you may want to quit before you ever get to the level that the build finally culminates in. So that's what a test drive is for. So it's kind of buildish and it's kind of guidish. It's a test drive. It's your ability to see how it'll feel, how it'll play. Now, in this particular test drive, this is going to be much more on the guidish, like way on the guidish side of things. I'm going to be taking you with obviously I'm going to be giving you what I think are the optimal choices, but I'm going to be giving you many choices as we go. Well, I shouldn't say many, but multiple choices at different critical junctures. And that's going to be to allow you to emphasize how you want to strengthen that character. I'm going to give you a overview of what I think are the best choices, because in this particular case, like I say in the intro, if you are going to go with any kind of melee option for the Warlock, then what this class plays out as is very much the fighter, magic user, cleric from AD&D days. So in that respect, if you were playing a fighter, magic user, cleric in AD&D, you were a very powerful character, but you were never as powerful, say, in Magic as a straight magic user, obviously. In those days, your experience was being divided by 3. And you were leveling in each class individually as you went along. It wasn't just one level here and one level there. It was all 3 all at once. So that class ended up playing as a very powerful class based on its flexibility. But it was never going to outfight the fighter, the straight fighter, or paladin, or ranger, or whatever. And it was never going to outcast a straight magic user or outcast a straight cleric. But it was a character that could see what the situation called for and meet it. And that's what I think this class is best used as. So just like you, I like having a class that it does its thing, its specific thing, and that's what it does, and it does it super better than everybody else, and that makes you feel good. But it is quite a thing to be able to just kind of be really good at a lot of things. As we go through this, you're going to see, based on how the Warlock plays by itself, that you're going to be able to choose how you want to deal with that encounter. And what that also means is that it can be a variety for you. You don't have to always just open up with the same spell, encounter after encounter. This is the spell I cast, da-da-da-da-da. Maybe you're fighting in this one. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're doing something else altogether. There's going to be options with this character, and that's where the real power lies. So the options you're going to see as we go along is your ability. Let's say you want to be doubling down on melee combat. That's probably going to be a very common idea. I'm going to show you what kind of choices you should be making to do that. But I'm going to be taking you along in a generalized path where the character is going to be an effective melee combatant, but not not dominant by any means, not dominant, but an effective melee combatant and an effective caster. I'm probably leaning a little bit more on the caster side. The Pact of the Blade is kind of a weird thing these days, because to get the very most out of Pact of the Blade, the weird part is you need to go with strength. If you go with straight charisma, which we're actually going to be doing here in the test drive, you're not going to be able to employ great weapons because you need to have a 13 strength in the great weapon. Now, you could put the 13 into that, and I'll discuss that when we get there. That'll be an option, of course, that you can do. But that is something that you could straight up dump if you were going to just go with straight charisma. So the question becomes, is it worth, in the occasions where you're going to be a melee combatant, is it worth getting a couple more points of damage in a round-by-round basis? And I'm not diminishing that. But is it worth the investment that you're going to have to make into strength when you could get the same, well, not the same, but comparable, in the neighborhood of that kind of damage by going with straight charisma? Now, this is also meaning that if you were to have that 13 strength and you were to go straight up strength, that you would have access to the feats like Great Weapon Master, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I'll touch on those topics as well. So it's going to be kind of an experiment in a lot of theory grounded in I'm going to have a specific idea that we'll walk through, of course, but as we go along, I'm going to be talking about it, and then you could do this, and then you could do that. It's going to be a bit different than the rest of the test drives. I see this character as being a character that has the flexibility to control. You're going to have a lot of control with this character. Regardless, you're always going to have that. Whether you go full melee or not, you're always, if you stick with Pact of the Chain, you're always going to have a measure of round after round control. And because control can be such a dominant idea in the game, I want you to have that flexibility to just switch over there and be an effective controller if you want to cast that way. And then if you need to fight or feel like fighting, I mean, that could be the thing too. Like I was saying earlier, just the idea that you can engage and have a variety of ways of approaching an encounter. Maybe you're just bored of casting and you just want to get in there and smack people around. Maybe you got a new magic weapon and you want to try it out. There's going to be a lot of reasons that could guide how you want to approach a particular combat. Okay, now for race, species, whatever, I'm going to keep calling it race. I really have one idea in mind. You could pick any of the variations of them, but I really want you to consider playing an elf. The other two racial considerations, species considerations, I would consider would be gnome or human. Now, I would only go with gnome, oddly enough, if you were wanting to go really hard on Pact of the Blade and go with strength, I would go with the gnome. The reason why is you're going to end up having to dump your wisdom. Not necessarily maybe dump it, but yeah, probably have to dump it just to get your dex and your con at a reasonable level. And your charisma has to be at least 13. So you're in that kind of a situation where your wisdom is going to very much suffer. Now, as a warlock, you have proficiency in your wisdom save. And I'm not worried about whether you make perception rolls well or not. That's a whole different... I'm worried about the saving throws. So if you went with gnome, you would have proficiency and you'd be rolling for wisdom with advantage. And of course, it's just ridiculously amusing to think of a gnome running around with this greatsword or whatever. But that isn't the avenue that I'm going to explore. The avenue I'm going to explore is with the elf. Now, I'm going to assume high elf here. But you could just as easily go with any of the other two, wood elf or drow elf. So just to recap on what the high elf is going to get, you're going to get at first level, you're going to have a cantrip that you're going to be able to change around from the wizard spell list. It starts as prestidigitation. I don't know why that word is always hard for me to pronounce. And at a long rest, you'll be able to trade it out for another on the wizard cantrip list. You'll have dark vision and you'll have trance and you'll be immune to sleep and you'll have advantage against charmed, etc., etc., etc. Then at third level, you'll gain a casting of Detect Magic and you'll know Detect Magic and you'll have a casting of Misty Step at fifth level and a casting of Misty Step and no Misty Step. the principal point here is we want trance. And we want trance as a celestial because of that one spell. It's going to make a big difference in how this character can play. It's actually, if you want to look at it this way, and we'll get there at level 3 when you become a celestial, you're going to be able, that ability is kind of the bedrock idea of the generalist idea that I'm approaching this from. It fuels quite a bit, more than you might think. So for stats, we're going to go with a 15 charisma. We're going to go with a 13 and a 14 in con and dex. You're going to put the +2 into charisma. You're going to put the +1 into the 13. So you'll have 2 14s and a 12 in wisdom, and then a 10 in either strength or in intelligence. For our feat, our origin feat, obviously we're going to take alert. Now at first level, we have a D8 in hit points. We have light armor, which is nice, but that's really it. So this is the point. When you're ever thinking about a warlock with Pact of the Blade or wanting to be a melee combatant in whatever fashion, you don't have what it takes to really do the things that some of the other martial characters are going to do. You don't have the AC and you don't have the hit points. I mean, your hit points aren't awful, but getting behind, getting to a high value target in melee where you're going to get swarmed potentially by a whole bunch of combatants is a really bad idea for a Pact of the Blade warlock. In fact, as we go along with this, you could just simply not even do Pact of the Blade altogether. That's an option too. It's going to be very, very flexible. And the nice thing about how warlocks work is now the Pact of the Blade is simply an invocation. If you feel like you're not getting enough out of Pact of the Blade, you can trade it out. Your ability with the High Elf is that you're going to always be able to access True Strike. If you don't pick it normally, you're going to be able to access True Strike. So you're always going to be able to go about it that way. And in fact, you want to have True Strike regardless of how you're getting it, whether it be from the High Elf or from your warlock choices. When you hit 3rd level, you're going to get ranged options from the Celestial. But I think that I would definitely want to be still holding on to Eldritch Blast. So you'll see you're going to be a character that can go into melee, can go from range with your cantrips. You're going to be able to cast with control. You're going to have the familiar. The question is, how you want to approach any given combat. That's where the fun of this kind of character is really going to lie. So first level is not a great level for any warlock. You get 1 spell slot and you have 1 invocation. For your prepared spells, I'm going to suggest that you take Armor of Agathis and Hex. For your invocation, I think you really want to go with Pact of the Chain, because Pact of the Chain at early levels is just going to be particularly effective. Now, I'm going to go against my traditional thing with the Imp, and I'm going to again be going here with the Pseudo-Dragon, and you'll see why. But that does not mean that you're married to the Pseudo-Dragon. You can always be toggling it for the Imp. The Imp is far better, way better in terms of all the overall utility. I'm worried here about combat. And truth be told, if you are dealing with an enemy type that is immune to the poison condition, then you don't want the Pseudo-Dragon. You want the Imp. And I'm not talking about the Imp as a combatant. I'm talking about just simply having the Imp then run and use the help action and then simply just for overall great utility. Now, just as a quick note, people like to think that it's just like, oh, I'm just going to change them out whenever I want. It gets expensive to do that. So I am not going to just take it lightly that you're just going to be able to toggle them whenever you like. But DMs in how they deal with gold is completely different from table to table. So if you can get a whole bunch of material components to be able to just cast Find Familiar at will, then by all means do it. It's certainly something to spend gold on, and that's a good thing. But the reason I'm stressing the Pseudo-Dragon here is that because its sting is not an attack. It's an ability. It's just a straight up saving throw. This is so much better than in what it used to be. I mean, so much better that it really makes the Pseudo-Dragon 1A in my mind. It's the best of the combat familiars. So on a failed save, it's going to do 7 points of damage, and it's going to inflict the poison condition. And then if it fails that, if the recipient fails that save by 5 or more, they are asleep. Now, that save is a con save. It's starting with a DC of 12. So in general, you're talking about basically a coin flip of whether they're going to make the save or not make the save. And sometimes it's going to be far worse than that because you're going to deal with some that have, monsters, creatures that have super high cons. You can kind of tell by looking at them. Until you are 5th level, I wouldn't ever want to target any creature like that. I would want to be targeting the ones that I know are going to be more susceptible. So the fact that the pseudo-dragon is going to be able to run around and do this for free, and if you're getting a 50-50 chance of it, of an opponent failing their save, roughly speaking, then right out of the gate here, we're talking about essentially an extra 3.5 points of damage per round from the pseudo-dragon, right from the start. And in a 4-round combat, that means you'll probably have about 2 fails. So in those 2 fails, you're going to be doing that damage, and you're going to inflict 2 instances of the poison condition, and you're probably going to get 1 knockout. At the earlier levels, that's going to be more a bit more dicey. It might be like 2 out of the 3 combats that you get a knockout, but I think it's safe to say that just about 1 in the combat. The problem is you just never know when that's going to be. So if that comes at the very end of the combat, that's not very, meaningful. But if you get it right out of the gate, that's great. The pseudo-dragon also has it's very fragile. It doesn't really have any great defenses. It can't turn invisible. It doesn't have hands, blah, 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 blah. But it does move 60 feet. So it's important that you have this kind of sitting there in the back of your mind, because that's going to be going on throughout this entire test drive. The pseudo-dragon, round after round, inflicting this on the enemy. Now, because it doesn't have a lot of hit points, and because it doesn't have great defenses, it's vulnerable. So in the earlier levels 1 and 2 here, you're going to be probably having to resummon that pseudo-dragon from time to time. The damage that I'm going to be referring to is really vanilla damage. It's like 2014 standard average damage for a warlock. But you get past that from that extra 3.5 coming from the pseudo-dragon, and then how much you want to be spending on Armor of Agathis. So here at first level, it's not going to be all that great. You're going to feel, as a character, you're not going to feel all that powerful, except that you've got that pseudo-dragon zooming around, nuking everything. Don't forget that. And in the cases where you don't have the pseudo-dragon, you're turning it into the imp, and the imp is dominating in utility and spying and scouting and blah, 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 blah. You're going to be a very powerful character at first level, extremely powerful, but just don't think that you can be wading into combat just quite yet. At level 2, we get our second spell slot, and we get Magical Cunning as a 1-minute esoteric ritual that allows you to get half of your spell slots back. So if we do have 1 short rest in a day, you have your 2 spell slots, 1 from Magical Cunning and 2 more on a short rest. You're going to have 5 spell slots, and that's what we're going to have as we move along throughout this test drive. But, of course, you could argue that the biggest thing we get is 2 more invocations. So here's where the real question becomes. Do you go with Pact of the Blade? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to take you down that pathway. There's going to come a point in time where you may not even want to stick with Pact of the Blade. I would want to, but I could very easily see just relying on True Strike. What you do get from Pact of the Blade is the ability to access martial weapons, and that's a very big deal. The only problem is, of course, is that you're not a strength character, so you're not going to get the full value out of that, but you are going to be able to get a longsword, and you're going to be able to double hand that, so you'll be doing a D10 in damage. So now we have Pact of the Chain and Pact of the Blade. Now, this third one is also a really big question mark. Now, I think that the strongest, best investment is going to be Eldritch Mind. But there's other ways of doing this. You could go with Fiendish Vigor. If you do go with Fiendish Vigor, you're going to be getting 12 temporary hit points. Now, this is for somebody that wants to really get in there and go after things in combat, because this is, here at second level, Armor of Agathis is going to be doing 5 points of damage. You're going to get 5 temporary hit points, but don't worry about those because you've got the 12 from Fiendish Vigor. You're starting with that. As soon as Armor of Agathis comes online, you get to choose which temporary hit points you want. You're going to stick with the Fiendish Vigor ones. So with 12 temporary hit points at this kind of a level, that's almost always going to be good for at least 2 hits, and it's probably going to have 1 hit point left, maybe 2 hit points left in a lot of cases at this kind of level after 2 hits. Not always, of course, but often it should be there. So I would say bank on 2 hits from Armor of Agathis, and he could get 3. So now, if you are getting 2 hits out of Armor of Agathis from those 12 temporary hit points from Fiendish Vigor, you're doing 10 hit points of damage back that doesn't require an action. Just like the Pseudo-Dragon isn't requiring an action from you. So if this were to happen in one round, you would be getting, at this level, 13, now 13 hit points, 13.5 from Armor of Agathis at this level and from the Pseudo-Dragon. Now, if there is just 1 hit point left, what do you do in round 2? You cast Fiendish Vigor and do it again, because 13 hit points on average for a level 2 character is awfully, awfully good. That's one way to play it. I'm going to suggest you go with Eldritch Mind, but that is a very strong way to play. Now, there's going to be a way that you could flip all this, because Eldritch Mind, if you really wanted to go down this path, when we get the feat, you might want to trade out Eldritch Mind and put Fiendish Vigor back in. So just remember here, I'm not squeezing every last little thing to make you the best melee combat character that you can be. I'm making you a character that, or trying to describe a framework for you of a character that can embrace the game how you want to embrace the game. And I don't mean that just from a standpoint like any warlock is going to be able to do that, of course, but I'm talking about from combat to combat. If you go with the high strength build and you're going with great weapons, and that's a very effective thing, I've done it with the Fiend video, it's very strong, it's very effective, but you are severely losing, you're kind of kissing casting goodbye to do that. In a situation like that, it's all Armor of Agathis all the time, because you don't have to have a high charisma modifier to fuel Armor of Agathis or Hex. Another option here is if your DM is going to allow invocations from Xanathars, then there's improved Pact weapon. That's a plus, that would turn your weapon into a +1 weapon. That means it's going to be hitting for a little bit higher on the average, and it's going to be doing obviously a little bit more damage because it's hitting higher on the average and it's getting an extra +1 to damage. So that alone will start pushing you up beyond 2014 averages. And remember, you're still getting that +3.5 every round from the Pseudo-Dragon, and you're getting, and by the way, that +3.5, it's kind of weird how this works out. That +3.5 is roughly what the Imp was always giving in terms of the help action. So either way, if you do have the Imp for an encounter, that help action is still going to be worth roughly about that. And then, of course, it just becomes a question of how much value are you going to extract out of Armor of Agathis. And yet, there's another option that's viable as well, and that is that you could take lessons of the first ones and so grab an origin feat. Now, in this case, if you were to do that, I probably would want to go and grab Magic Initiate, because you're going to get a couple more cantrips and you're, of course, going to get a spell. Now, if that were the case, if you did go that way, I would strongly consider taking Sleep. Sleep is a very, very small area of effect. It's actually the smallest area of effect that you can have, where it's actually an area of effect. You could hit up to 4 targets, but it's much better than it used to be in terms of its longevity. It'll be useful throughout the rest of your career. So having a spell in your pocket that could hit a couple of targets, so maybe knock out one, that it isn't an all or nothing on one target, that's pretty nice to have. It is concentration, so it would negate Hex. You wouldn't be able to run Hex with it. So there is that. But once again, it's that flexibility. Its reward level is very, very high to go with Sleep. So just to quickly review for the invocations, I'm going to suggest that you take Eldritch Mind. But the next recommendation would be, if you really wanted to go, the Pact of the Blade option, the hard line Pact of the Blade, is to grab Fiendish Vigor. And of course, having 12 temporary hit points whenever you want them is always great. After that, I would consider, again for Pact of the Blade, I would consider Improved Pact Weapon. And finally, if you wanted to go a little bit more, lean more on the caster side, you could be going and grabbing Lessons of the First Ones and grabbing Magic Initiate. You could grab Lucky if you wanted, but I would go Lessons of the First Ones and grab Sleep. You could grab Shield. That's another interesting choice. Good Berry is an interesting choice. I mean, there's other choices, but I think for how this character is going to play, I think I would want to grab Sleep. The Warlock dreads that moment when they're out of spells and they don't have anything that they can do that's going to really alter a combat. Having a casting of Sleep that it could win the day for you is something that you're just not going to find out of a lot of first level spells. Now, for the spells that you should be looking at, because you get another spell preparation here for the Warlock, you could go with one of the ritual spells. Hellish Rebuke is another interesting choice because it's going to be able to allow you to use your reaction to do damage. You don't have a lot of spell slots to be burning on this, though. So that's for somebody that's going to go so hard on Pact of the Blade that they are going to have a couple of spell slots available throughout the day. All things being equal, I'm going to say that you grab Tasha's. Now, if you did go with the Magic Initiate idea, then don't take Tasha's, because if you're going to grab Sleep, that is. So you can see what I'm saying here. I'm taking you down a general path. I'm suggesting Eldritch Mind, but there are a lot of strong choices you could be making, and I want you to... And a lot of these, you could still go back and rearrange them and change them as you are leveling. So I just want to make you aware of what the choices are, because how you want to approach playing a fighter magic user cleric, which is what this is essentially, is really the fun of the class. Okay, third level. Now we get our second level spells, and of course we get the Celestial Patron. Healing Light is going to give us a pool of d6s. That's going to equal 1 plus our Warlock level. So here we're going to get 4 d6s. As a bonus action, you can give somebody a d6. You can actually spend more of those if you choose to. It's up to your charisma modifier in how many you can send at one time. The creature must be within 60 feet of you. You must be able to see them. And you get all these back when you finish a long rest. So what these are going to be best used for in general is, of course, going to be to pick somebody up that's fallen. But you're going to have a very specific other use for them, and that's to keep the pseudo-dragon up. So if the pseudo-dragon fell too far down in hit points but didn't die, it may be worth, because if it does die, it poofs. So you're not going to be able to pick up the pseudo-dragon. So it may be worth it to spend a dice to keep the pseudo-dragon on its feet. And we'll get there in a moment as to what I mean. And I'm not suggesting that you do that as the primary thing. It's simply another option. The best use of Healing Light by far is to pick up fallen comrades. I would not use it as a general form of healing. I would use it as a form of like first aid, medic kind of thing. You would use Healing Light in the exact same way that you would use Healing Word. You're going to gain Guiding Bolt, you're going to gain Cure Wounds, and you're going to get Aid. Aid is the spell that is the big difference here. So let's talk about Aid, and let's talk about being an elf and being a warlock. Aid can affect up to 3 targets. They all have their hit point maximums raised by 5. So this can be like the mother of all pickup spells, because if 3 people were to have fallen, you could pick all 3 of them back up. They'd, gain 5 hit points, but they'd be up. But the big deal here is that that effect lasts for 8 hours. So when you are in a long rest situation, your trance completes a long rest within 4 hours. If the rest of the party is on an 8-hour long rest, then what you will be able to do is really kind of wild here as a celestial elf warlock. So let's say the rest of the party is going to complete their long rest at 8 in the morning. At 4 in the morning, you're done. So around 7 o'clock in the morning or so, you cast Aid on 3 targets. Let's say you and the pseudo-dragon and one other party member. Now, you could not cast it on yourself, but you definitely cast it on the pseudo-dragon. Great. So Aid is done. That's great. Now everybody's got 5 temporary hit points. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. Lasts for 8 hours. Then you take out your jar of beetles. You take out the beetle. You cast Hex on the beetle and crush the beetle. And now Hex is running. Hex now, with a 2nd level spell slot, is running for 4 hours. You then take your short rest, and you're ready to go with the rest of the party, and you have 3 hours of Hex for free, and you have Aid running for free for 7 hours. And all your spell slots back. Now, Aid's upcast is 5 of those hit points at every level. So now think about the picture now. So now that pseudo-dragon has 5 more hit points. That's essentially a 50% increase. So now, if you really needed to, you could probably pick it back up with, not strictly speaking pick it back up, but you could bolster it back with Healing Light if you really needed to. Again, not saying that would be the primary thing, but it becomes a bit more viable now that it has a little bit more hit points to be able to play with, so it's not just getting dropped in one hit. And as we scale up through the game, this is going to allow the pseudo-dragon to roughly scale a bit. It makes the pseudo-dragon far more viable. Everybody is going to love having an extra 5 hit points. And they're going to like it even more that they're getting 10 and 15 and 20 for free at the beginning of every day. And you've got Hex running for free as well. So you really jackpot as an elf, as a celestial here. And at 3rd level, of course, because you're an elf, or with the high elf, you're going to get detect magic as well. So you get a free casting of that. And of course, it's a ritual, so you could always cast it as a ritual. The other 3 spells you get from the Celestial is Lesser Restoration, Light, and Sacred Flame. So now, if you did use it on yourself, Aid that is, then you have 5 more hit points. That's great. And then when you're talking about Armor of Agathis, that has now scaled up as well. So now you're getting 10 temporary hit points from Armor of Agathis. If you took Fiendish Vigor to do that, you would still have the 12. But Armor of Agathis is now dealing 10 at a pop. So if you did take the 12 with Fiendish Vigor, and if it lasts 2 shots, and at this level it still will last 2 shots almost all the time, you're talking about 20 points of damage from that spell. Now, Armor of Agathis lasts an hour, so if you can keep it going with Fiendish Vigor, you absolutely should. You don't ever want it to run out, of course. And I would, generally speaking, because your damage isn't, all that supernaturally awesome on your attacks, if you did go with the Armor of Agathis route here, I would strongly and you did have Fiendish Vigor, then I would just go ahead and use my action on Fiendish Vigor. Remember that at any given round, that pseudo-dragon could be KOing a target. The frustrating part is you just don't know when that's going to be, but you're forcing saving throw after saving throw after saving throw after saving throw, round after round after round. And it's important to keep that in mind because your actions may seem like they're a waste, but in the scheme of things, it isn't because that pseudo-dragon is running around and it's beefed up and supported now. Now, for your 2nd level spells, I would definitely want to grab Invisibility. After that, it becomes an Invisibility just simply for the utility. Mirror Image is a great spell. I love that spell, but you actually want to get hit and if you're using Armor of Agathis. So don't use Mirror Image, and it can be an expensive form of defense anyway. I would go with Suggestion as the other spell. Suggestion could be used in a dungeon scenario or in a hostile environment scenario, but it can also be used in social situations, out of combat kind of situations. Now, you could grab Misty Step here and then trade it out at 5th level because you're going to get it via being a high elf. So it's really just a question of whether you want to bother with that or not. And then at 4th level, we get our ASI, which we're going to take as a feat. Now, this is really which way do you go? If you go with something like Warcaster here, we're going to obviously be marching Charisma up to 18. If you go with Warcaster here, you could get rid of Eldritch Mind. That's if you took Eldritch Mind. But Warcaster has a very interesting effect for a character like this, and that is that because you can use a cantrip as an opportunity attack, you're going to be able to use True Strike as an opportunity attack. that can wildly change what your DPR output is going to be like, even with something as humble as a longsword. If you only got one opportunity attack in every combat where you could use True Strike, it would bump your DPR by about 3.5 points of damage per round on average. Now, that number I'm quoting is when we get to 5th level and it upgrades a bit. So keep that in mind. We're at 4th level right at this moment. It would be downgraded just a touch from that. So probably about 3, maybe 2 high 2s. So that's obviously Warcaster is going to be if you really wanted to be going into the idea of being, if you were going hard into the Pact of the Blade and you took Fiendish Vigor at 2nd level, then what Warcaster is going to do is going to help supplement and support your ability to maintain Hex or whatever concentration spell you've cast, and be able to get off a True Strike because you're in the middle of an encounter. Now, opportunity attacks are just really DM dependent. How often they're going to come up, and they could come up a lot. It just depends on your DM. So value Warcaster accordingly. But you're primarily taking that, of course, for the concentration effect. But you can get great value out of that cantrip. Great value. If you wanted to switch into a different tack, you could go with something like Fey Touched here is actually a good choice. Fey Touched is going to, now it's going to be kind of interesting because you're going to get Misty Step, and you're going to end up getting that twice now. So you're going to have it here at 4th level, and you're going to get a free casting of it, and then you're going to get a casting of it at 5th level from being an elf. The only thing that's kind of wasted here is that both the elf and the feat of Fey Touched would give you having the spell always prepped. So that's kind of redundant here. But getting 2 free castings of Misty Step, that's probably all you really need in a day. But what's nice about it is it means you don't have to hold on to that one for dear life. You don't have to just look at it and say, well, this is my I'm in big trouble card. Now you could use one of them a bit more aggressively when you hit 5th level, that is. So it could be a very strong choice. And for the 1st level spell, you would want to, I think, if you didn't go with the Magic Initiate idea earlier from lessons of the first ones, then you go with Sleep here, and you get a casting of Sleep. Now, if you went from that point of view, just to step back, you're looking at a character that you have your 5 spell slots in a day. At 5th level, you're going to have a casting of Detect Magic. You have a variable cantrip. You have a casting of Sleep and 2 castings of Misty Step at 5th level, with the Pseudo Dragon running around, with Aid and Hex running for free. So even if you did cast Armor of Agathis once in every encounter, you would have the option when you want to use a control spell like Sleep, or when we get into the better ones as we go along here, you had Hex for free. That's fine. Let it go. Drop the big control spell and go to town. Or if you want to keep Hex, then just keep Hex and run around and do damage. It's a flexible character. Oh, and yes, as a Celestial, you've got Healing Light. So not only do you have Aid running for free, you've got the ability to pick up Fallen Comrades to be able to bolster the Pseudo Dragon. The Pseudo Dragon's running around and doing all this to the enemy, round after round, inflicting a save. There's a lot going on. And I know this is a very strange test drive because I'm normally very specific about what I'm doing, but I'm trying to refresh your memory as to what's going on here and the kind of choices that are going to make you the happiest. Because there isn't one definite way to go here. It's really a question of what is... I'm trying to give you a versatile character. That's my recommendation. But if you want to go straight into casting, or you want to go straight into the Pact of the Blade, either of those is fine too. So at 5th level, we get access to our 3rd level spells, and that's a huge, big deal. And of course, you grab Hypnotic Pattern. Of course. Then it becomes a question of, do you take Counterspell? Counterspell is one of those spells that doesn't come up all the time, but you're going to feel really dumb if you don't have it and you really, really needed to have it. Or do you take something like Summon Undead? Because you have the Pseudo Dragon running around, and like I said, it's going to inflict the poison condition probably twice. If you do the Putrid Spirit and it hits a poison target, it paralyzes that target. Now, would I rather have Hypnotic Pattern or would I rather have Summon Undead? I think I'd rather have Hypnotic Pattern, But if you wanted to go with a variety, and again, the juxtaposition, here you are, Celestial, casting Summon Undead, that's kind of interesting. So if you're a combo person, if that's the kind of thing that really gets you excited, then Summon Undead is clearly the way to go. My recommendation, my one that's going to be your party, you're the party Swiss Army knife, I would say you want to have Hypnotic Pattern and Counterspell. Now, the celestial spells we get are Daylight and Revivify. Now, Revivify, I mean, having the ability to pick up somebody that died is one of the most important things in D&D. Dying stinks. And with Revivify, it kind of really takes the sting out of dying, because were you really dead? It was like a minute. It wasn't less than a minute. So maybe you weren't really dead. I know that if my character dies, my pride gets hurt. But if I died and got revivified, I don't have to think of it as being anything more than like they put the paddles on me or something like that. So Revivify does two things. Not only does it bring a character back into the game, but it also salves that player's ego a little. Now, other things that are going on here at 5th level. Aid is upgraded now by another 5 points, so the pseudo-dragon has 10 more hit points than normal. You have 10 more hit points than normal, and lucky party member number 3 has 10 more hit points than normal. So Armor of Agathis is now upgraded to 15. That's in temporary hit points that it's giving you and in the damage that it's going to deal. So if you took 2 hits that didn't completely snuff out those 15, and if you did get hit twice at this level, it's kind of likely that those 15 hit points are gone. But if they weren't, and you did have Fiendish Vigor, that's what you spend that on Fiendish Vigor. Now, Fiendish Vigor with 12 at this level could survive into 2 hits. By that I mean you could get hit once for like 10 or 11, have 1 hit point left to be able to trigger the damage once again. So if you're looking at it from the standpoint of your action for Fiendish Vigor being used to potentially do 30 points and having 12 temporary hit points on top of it, is that a good use of your action? Could be, especially if you cast like a big control spell early. And remember, the pseudo-dragon's running around doing its damage as well. So there's a lot of things going on. And of course, you're going to be able to, now you're 5th level, so you've got 6 dice in your Healing Light pool. So I'm sure that by this point, you're probably saying, Matt, there's too many choices here. This is kind of it. This is really it. And I know it is a bit confusing. It's a bit, like I said, far more guide-ish. But just to go back, what my main ideas are is you're taking Pact of the Blade, you're taking Pact of the Chain, you're taking Eldritch Mind. For your feat, if you are going to go at all into Pact of the Blade, and I'm assuming that you will, I'm going to suggest that you take Warcaster. If you did take Warcaster, then you trade out Eldritch Mind for something like Fiendish Vigor. Another option would be to take Agonizing Blast here. Agonizing Blast could either be put on Eldritch Blast or whatever ranged cantrip you're using. And it, of course, could also go on True Strike. Now, if it goes on True Strike, that's where you start really beginning to rack things up. And at 6th level, it's going to get even bigger. So that could feed into Warcaster very, very nicely. I wouldn't recommend doing this with Agonizing Blast. It does, when it hits, it's going to hit great. But how often are you going to be doing it? So if you're going to use True Strike all the time, well, then by all means do it. This is the way that you could actually just skip Pact of the Blade altogether. Pact of the Blade is going to open up different options for you. Here at 5th level, you're going to see. And then True Strike is, of course, not going to give you access to martial weapons. So there is that to consider. Now, for invocations, you're taking Thirsting Blade is my recommendation, and you're going to take Investment of the Chainmaster. Investment of the Chainmaster is critical here, not for the bonus action attack. Now the familiar is in some business, because now you've got your reaction to use to be able to defend the familiar again. So you're going to allow that pseudo-dragon to have resistance. And most importantly, these are the two big things, is defending that familiar a little bit better, but the biggest reason is that whenever the familiar is going to be forcing any kind of saving throw, it now uses your save DC. So now if you consider that familiar is running around doing all the havoc that it's doing with a much higher DC now, and 10 more hit points than it normally should have, and having the resistance to be able to apply to an attack on it, means that familiar is going to be far more resilient than it ever was before. The Celestial is the only one that can do this in terms of giving aid, and giving it for free for the bulk of the day to the familiar is really, really great. And at 6th level, we get our Celestial ability of Radiant Soul. We now gain resistance to radiant damage, which is great, and when we cast a spell that deals radiant or fire damage, we can add our charisma modifier to the damage to one target. So now you're looking at something like True Strike. Theoretically, if you True Striked, you're gaining your charisma modifier from True Strike. Now, if you had to deal radiant damage, which you can, you're gaining that charisma modifier again from Radiant Soul. And if you did go with Agonizing Blast for True Strike, you're looking at +4, you're looking at a +12. And True Strike is upgraded by a D8 at this point. So if in this scenario where a target that was under your hex incurred an opportunity attack from you with Warcaster, you would be able to True Strike at them for a D10, a D8 from True Strike, a D6 from Hex, plus 12. That's 25.5 in raw potential damage. That's going to come out to about 16 points on average, folks. Now, I'm not saying that I would go into that or not, but here's your other switcheroo option. If you wanted to go and just say, you know what, Pact of the Blade, it's been nice knowing you. I'm just going to go from True Strike here on out. You certainly could. Now, if you were to do that, you're going to lose access to martial weapons, which is a problem. You're going to lose the ability to access something like Eldritch Smite, which you certainly might want to do. You're going to lose the ability to get 2 attacks, which you were getting from Thirsting Blade. So it becomes a question. I mean, the total raw damage output is roughly the same. It's a little bit lower from True Strike, but you've got one shot at it. So if you miss, you miss. Staying with Pact of the Blade is going to be a far more stable approach, and it's going to give you access to something like Eldritch Smite. And then, of course, at higher levels, you're going to get access to even better things. And at 7th level, we get our 4th level spells. The big spell here is, of course, Dimension Door. We're also going to get another invocation. At this point, I would strongly suggest taking Eldritch Smite, but you don't have to. It just depends on how much you're using Pact of the Blade. If your DM is going to allow for something like Xanathar's, I would strongly look at Ghostly Gaze. I love that invocation. But this would also allow, if you any of the other ideas that I've been suggesting so far that you didn't pluck up then, if you didn't want to go with Eldritch Smite, it is a bit specialized. If you didn't want that, and your DM doesn't allow Xanathar's, then something like picking up Lessons of the First Ones, or some of the other ones like Mask of Many Faces, or any of those kinds of things. One with Shadows, where you're able to get access to invisibility on a frequent basis and not casting a spell slot, that could be good. Otherworldly Leap is that one that I wouldn't, a lot of people love it. It's great, except that by this point, at 7th level is where I would think that most characters could consider actually taking it. Don't you have something better by now from a magic item? But if you don't, that's something to consider. But I would recommend, in general, going with Eldritch Smite. Other things that happen here at 7th level, of course, Armor of Agathys goes up by another 5. Aid goes up by another 5. So Agathys starts becoming a really big problem for the enemy. Especially if you're refueling it, you're willing to sacrifice an action, which you could do, to to just keep refueling it. You could certainly do that. Again, you are not a character that's there to be just the heavy hitter all the time. You could fill that role if you have to. In general, I think that having that flexibility just to fuel Agathis if you want to is perfectly viable. But Armor of Agathis can just dish out a tremendous amount of damage on its own. And if you keep feeding it temporary hit points, as long as you've got one left, you can keep this party going. But that's the thing. It's putting you into combat. You're occupying the enemy. You are, by virtue of Armor of Agathis at this point, you would have 20 temporary hit points. So you're able to absorb some hits that you wouldn't be able to absorb normally. You've got more hit points in general from aid for free. You don't hit like a truck because we're not using great weapons. And if you went that way with the great weapons, then you're looking at 4th level, you probably wanted to take Great Weapon Master and things of that sort. That's a very specialized way of going about this. But it is important to note that things like aid, you don't have to have a great modifier to do. Aid is completely independent of your modifier. So it is perfectly viable to go with strength and go with the great weapons and go with Great Weapon Master. Very little changes here in that sense. If you're from what I'm talking about, from going hardcore Pact of the Blade to going with the great weapon strength idea. But what you are saying goodbye to are things like sleep. You are saying goodbye to things like your pseudo-dragon hitting all the time. You are talking about losing things like hypnotic pattern. So it's a question of what you want. I like the flexibility here. I like being the fighter magic user cleric. It's a lot of fun. And at 8th level, we get our ASI, which is going to be charisma at 20. Not a big shock there. And at 9th level, we get another invocation and we get our 5th level spells. So here I'm going to strongly suggest that you take Synaptic Static and you take Scrying. Another ability, of course, we get is Contact Patron, which is like Contact Other Plane, which is incredibly great. But if you consider now, if you did open up a round with Synaptic Static and the pseudo-dragons running around causing the poison condition, you are really controlling with just those two things alone. You're inflicting an enormous amount of control on the field. And Static still plays nice with things like Hex. It is at this point here with a 5th level spell slot that Hex runs for 24 hours. So you will always have it available to you for free. Now, for the invocation here, Life Drinker is a 9th level Pact of the Blade invocation. It's kind of hard to say no to it, but it depends on how hard you're going into it. If you went hard for Pact of the Blade, then you definitely take Life Drinker. I think I would take it in general, but there are a lot of great options that I've been talking about, and you couldn't take all of them. So whatever you didn't take that you wished you had taken, this would be a good time to grab it. Life Drinker is nice, but it isn't the end-all be-all. You're not worried about eking out every last erg of damage if you're going the generalist route. But because I have been approaching it from the generalist route, I'm going to want to go back and kind of recoup and just kind of keep pace a little bit so that my damage is still meaningful. And then we finish out at 10th level with Celestial Resistance. So when you use your Magical Cunning feature, where you finish a short or a long rest, you gain temporary hit points equal to your Warlock level plus your Charisma modifier. So at this point, that's 15. But it gets a little bit better. You can pick 5 other creatures that get half your Warlock level plus your Charisma modifier. So another 10 at this level, temporary hit points. So now Aid at this level has been giving you 20 extra hit points. So the Pseudo-Dragon has 20 extra hit points for free, and it's getting 10 temporary hit points for free. The only problem for you, and of course your comrades are all getting 10 temporary hit points, so it's kind of like getting Inspiring Leader, with the advantage that it also triggers after your Magical Cunning, and you don't have to give a 10-minute speech and all that type of stuff. But in terms of the total hit points that everybody else is receiving, it's a bit of a downgrade. But still, 10 is pretty good. The only problem here is that it doesn't help you really very much with Armor of Agathis at all. Unless you came out of a combat and you had like one temporary hit point and you didn't have Fiendish Vigor and you use your Magical Cunning, you could get up to 10. Yeah, it is, or up to 15. It doesn't really do much for Armor of Agathis. But it's a great ability. And so, you're giving your Pseudo-Dragon at 10th level here is getting 20 more hit points plus 10 temporary hit points. So it's just becoming far more survivable. So everything that I'm talking about here with the Familiar causing all this havoc, it's much more reliable that it will actually, and you're giving it resistance because of investment in the Chainmaster. So it's only the Celestial can do it quite this way. What I was talking about with the Great Old Ones, the Great Old Ones can punish with the Pseudo-Dragon the best because it can inflict disadvantage on some of those rolls at this level. But you're able to keep the thing going from round after round after round. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other as to which uses the Pseudo-Dragon the best. But yeah, the Celestial changed a lot just from that one spell and how it interacts with everything else that I've talked about. It really changes things around for the Celestial. It's a far more fun, interesting. I've always liked the Patron idea. It's a very fun character, a fighter, cleric, magic user. What a fun kind of character to play. So I hope that this has been comprehensible. I know it's a lot more. It's a lot more scattershot in one sense. I'm giving you a lot of options to pick from here, as opposed to just one particular continuous thread. But I hope you have been following my thread here. The idea is to be flexible, to be able to contribute in melee effectively, whether that be by dealing, kind of average damage, but then supplementing that with Armor of Agathis and the chaos of the Pseudo-Dragon, or being able to switch into full casting mode and doing big things with Hypnotic Pattern, etc., that kind of thing. Well, that's all I've got. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please share, please subscribe. And if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, you can always search for a secret door. Until next time, I cast Bless on all of you.